Okay, let's get started. I'm so excited to introduce you to one of my clients on today's episode, Nicola. And she is an incredible client and such an inspiration, I think, to so many, will be such an inspiration to so many independent consultants as she shares her story today. So Nicola Kastner, welcome to the podcast. I would love to start off with you just introducing yourself and tell us all about you and how you became an IC and anything else you want to share.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled. Which I think many of you will learn today that I'm a total fangirl of Melissa. I not only am her client, I listen to every podcast and take notes. I'm like total nerd and I've learned so much. So thank you for this opportunity. It's super exciting. So to answer your question, Nicola Kastner, my company is called the Event Strategist. I actually just relaunched my consulting practice in January of this year after spending 5.5 years on the corporate side, brand side, working for SAP, a large technology company, and leading event marketing strategy for them. So based in Toronto, good Canadian girl, just come off the long weekend. And my company is really focused on providing event strategy consulting services or advisory services for companies just to help them optimize their event investments, really to drive bottom line results.
So excited. I have thousands of questions I want to answer or ask you today, but we really constrained it down. Let's start off and tell us why you left corporate again, and are focused on your consulting business now.
Yeah. So for a little bit of context, I in 2012 had moved from the agency side of the event marketing business to started my own practice. And ran that for, I guess it was about 4 years. And I'm sure we'll get deeper into this in a little while. But, one of the most important things when you're running your business is investing as much time into building the business as doing your client work. Unfortunately, it's not a lesson that I had learned the first time. And so after coming off a 15-month assignment for a client where I essentially worked as a full-time employee, I realized as my own accountant and IT and salesperson and all of those things, I hadn't done any of those things. So 2 things happened. The nest egg that I had built up, because you make hay while the sun shines as a consultant, had gone away because I hadn't done my taxes on time and my accountant couldn't do his magic. So sort of any opportunity that he had was gone. So that took away the nest egg, and I had no pipeline. So I decided that I would look to rebuild my business or look for a full-time job, and whatever happened would happen. And actually, full-time job happened at SAP. So I was there for 5.5 years, super fast, 1 week. So my business didn't even have time to catch up. So spent 5.5 years there. And, it's just working in corporate, especially big corporate, it's exhausting. It's mentally exhausting. And I actually just realized that I didn't like getting up to go to work anymore. I wasn't happy about what I was doing. I'm not sure if I can swear, so I'll do the PC version. My BC filter or BS filter was at 0, which is a very dangerous place to be in the corporate world. And so really just decided, what did I want to do? I spent a lot of time thinking about it while in the last year when I was at SAP, because I wanted to make sure it wasn't I wasn't just jumping for the sake of jumping to run away, that I was actually going to do something that would make me happy. And then it wasn't maybe a COVID impact, right? Working in events were gone during COVID. So my entire discipline changed. That was what was making me miserable. And it really wasn't. So, that sort of was the impetus for me to make the leap. Sort of the first time I tested the water with a former colleague, she had reached out and said, "Hey, do you know anybody that does event strategy support on a freelance basis?" And I was like, "Well, if it was January, it'd be me, but not so far." And she's like, "Well, consider us your first client." And I was like, "Well, if it's going to be that easy, I'm going to do it over after all." So that was the beginning.
That's amazing. So tell us, kind of going back to that first experience as an independent consultant, you touched on that briefly. Tell us a little bit more about what lessons you learned after that first initial round and how you're applying that to your business right now.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And a lot of it, I have to say, is I learned from you. So this isn't your question, but I'm going to start with this. Is I knew, so as I launched the business, I knew that I wanted it to be a sustainable business. I knew that I wanted to, not kill myself working 24/7, and I wanted to do work for clients in the right way. But I also needed to provide a lifestyle for my family and for myself and so forth. So if I think about it, when I was in the corporate world, we had advisors, we had people that we worked with, we had coaches, we had all of those things. They were always available to us. And so I decided very early on to find a coach. I found you through your podcast, I was searching for content for my LinkedIn post to tell people that I was starting my own business, and came across you through that search and listened, got hooked. And so there was, to me, no question that I should work with. No, like I didn't even look at anybody else. It was, like I said, I'm fangirl. So I was yours instantly. But to me, and you've taught me these lessons, I think is a winded way of where I'm getting to with answers to these questions. But I think the first of all was, in the past, I almost operated as staff augmentation. I would come in and I would take on long-term contracts that were 15 months dedicated to one company, 2 years as an in-plant in an organization, which were based on hourly sales versus value-based projects and offerings, which I could offer, as one of the benefits of the great resignation, so to speak, or what I prefer to call the great realization, is companies are embracing freelance talent. They can get top tier talent for a fraction of the cost, really, that they would pay if it was a full-time employee, where they'd have to pay the salaries and the benefits and so forth. And so I really thought about, what is the value that I am going to bring to my clients? And then how would I charge for that? And that's not hourly, that's output. So that was number one. And then obviously I touched on it before, when you're your own business, you're everything, right? And so certain things I have outsourced that I can, but I also I carve up my week. Not literally, because I'm not one of these disciplined people that, have their day structured, but I make a conscious effort to invest time each week in my business. So sort of 3 areas. One is client work, right? That's the obvious, but the other is building the infrastructure of the business, investing in making sure that my books are up to date, or any of my website's up to date, and my capabilities presentation, any of those type of things. So sort of building in the foundational areas of the business. And then the last bucket or pillar is the sales process, right? And you and I have spent a lot of time talking about sales, because I find it really awkward and to do, but really, how do I stay relevant? How do I put my thought leadership out front so that people can find me? And so those 3 pillars are time is consciously spent on those each week, and will be throughout the rest of my time in business.
Yeah. Amazing to have that kind of structure in place, and to really have transformed your business from the version 1.0, where you, like you were describing, you were a staff augmentation type of a longer term resource, now into you getting to pick and choose what types of clients you work with, how long you work with them, how embedded you are into their process, and setting your own lifestyle and the way you're spending your business capacity.
Yeah. And I think you hit on it there, picking my own the clients I want to work with. I don't have to take every opportunity that comes to me. When you work in corporate, you have to do your job, whether you like the person that you're going to be working with, or the fit or the chemistry's there, not there. You have to do it. You don't have to do that as an independent consultant. And so if I want to provide my best work, I need to work for somebody that's going to value me and my expertise and my services. And so I'm okay with walking away from a potential client, if the fit and the chemistry is in there.
Yeah. Amazing. I'm so excited to dive into these next couple of topics with you about lead gen and sales, because you're in a position, Nicola, where clients are coming to you. You're very much known for what you do and sought after for the niche that and the expertise that you've built over the course of your career and as a consultant. And so I'm just curious, what tips would you give other consultants who are really wanting to elevate themselves into that spot where they are sought after for what they do and not having to kind of feel like they're pushing the boulder up the hill to become known for and known to their ideal clients?
Yeah. So for me, I've spent and I've invested a lot of time when I was at SAP, building my own personal brand and credibility. I believe in giving back to the industry that I love. And so I share a lot of my time, my perspectives, whether it's through LinkedIn or it's speaking engagements, whatever that might be. And by offering my insights for quote unquote free, I don't know if that's the right word to use, but I just feel like it instantly adds that level of credibility. And so taking that time to invest and give back would be one of my number one recommendations. The other is being genuine, right? We have to be true to who we are. And I think if your clients can understand and sense that, there's an immediate trust factor that comes, right? And certainly in being genuine, sharing your knowledge in a way, we talked about this, how do you establish credibility when somebody doesn't know you? And it's by the questions you asked, it's like, what a mile in these people's shoes, right? So, being genuine and then focusing on where I can add value versus selling has been so important for me.
Oh, yeah. Can we talk a little bit about that? So are you okay if I share a little
of course,
bit about our conversations?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that's such an important insight that you, at least from my vantage point, that you gained during our coaching together, of really looking at the way you're thinking about a sales process and what you're actually selling and that kind of thing. Do you want to share a little bit about what that?
Melissa's right. Like I've been really lucky, and demand has been higher than my capacity. And I understand that that's not the case for a lot of consultants especially at the beginning. And so, I'm very thankful and for that, but I do struggle. And I did struggle with the conversations on how do I actually sell myself? What do I say? And in a way that it doesn't feel salesy. Like I really struggled with here's my value, here's how I charge type conversations. And we spent a lot of time working through this, because this was my biggest block and has been my biggest block. And I think, to me, the epiphany, and I think about this every single time I have a conversation now with a client, is I almost used to feel like it was a job interview with them, like they were interviewing me. And you taught me to flip that around. I'm now interviewing them to see if they get one of my spots. And that mental shift and the dynamic change it's a game changer. It really is. And so as I think through that, I think about, I now have a structured approach of going into the calls as well. Before I'd take all my notes, and then I'd have to sit down and I'd write a proposal, and I'd be like, oh my God, how do I do this? I don't know what to do. And it would become so overwhelming to me. I hated writing these proposals, even though I wanted the business. And so now taking this sort of changing the dynamic of the conversation, but also being structured about what are the questions that I need to ask? How do I need to demonstrate my value? But what are the questions I need to know in order to build the right solution and recommendation for potential clients it's changed the game and the conversation.
Yeah. Tell me, so we did and have been spending a lot of time on the sales process for you and really mapping that out. And like you just described, the mindset part of it was I think kind of unlocked the whole process for you in a way that made it feel so much less less arduous, less awkward, less overwhelming, and more like a consultant, right? Asking questions and understanding and building a solution. What other things would you recommend to the listeners, Nicola, in terms of building out a sales process, and what changes and adjustments that you think were valuable as you've established this sales process for yourself?
Yeah. So I mentioned the questions, right? And so I sort of reverse engineered the process now. If ultimately I'm going to create a statement of work or a proposal for them, or let's just say a proposal for them, what do I need to know? What do I need to know? What is baseline minimum? And then how am I going to refine and make sure that my understanding is right? So that's the end of the process. So at the end of the process, I know I want to review with them my statement of work. Step before that is I need to have the right insights. Step before that, and I'm building it backwards, is really understanding what are the questions, what are the information I need to know in order to get to those next steps downstream. So this whole reverse engineering of starting with the end, it's cliche, right? Start with the end in mind, but it's so true. What do I need? And then how do I engineer the call to make sure, or the calls to make sure that I'm able to get that right information? That's been really that's been a big part of the game change. But also then, how do you maintain and sustain the inbound engine as well? Because the sales, the closing calls, proposal calls, whatever you want to call them, that's the end of the process. What are all of the things that I need to do in the lead up to that to be able to get to that? How visible do I need to be? What do I need to do to generate that demand?
Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about that part of your business. So what have you been doing that has been creating that demand, and how do you think about that part of the process?
Yeah. So I mentioned my LinkedIn coming out post of announcing my own business. And I struggled with it because first of all, I took on way too much at the beginning and I was overwhelmed. And so I didn't want to launch to the market immediately because I just didn't even have time for a conversation with anybody because I'd taken on too much client work. Step one, fixed that problem. So when I wrote my post, I titled it with the subject line, "The Great Resignation is real. I know, because I joined the club." And I told a very personal story about why. I talked about, did imposter syndrome try and tell me that my value was tied to working for a big brand? And I was very, very vulnerable in my LinkedIn post. I also talked about the dynamics of work changing and people accessing this top talent. It was a really long post. And I got 32,000 views on that post. And I remember you and I would talk every week and I'd be like, this is crazy. It keeps going. It keeps going. Okay. And so to me, that was a huge inbound engine. It created a lot of buzz. But now that dies off after a few months, right? I really try to think about, how can I keep my name and that drumbeat of Nicola in the public eye without it being too much, right? Because then people start to tune you out as well. So for me, it's a combination of speaking engagements, LinkedIn posts, commenting on people's posts, engaging in the conversation, and then as well as my network. Our networks are wonderful sources of referrals and opportunities. So taking that time to keep that keep the contact with my network has been a really important process for me as well.
Yeah. So something these things are things you love doing, and you've designed your lead generation process around the things that you love doing and are really good at, and that your network that resonate with your network also.
Yeah.
Yeah, such a good alignment versus trying to force yourself to take on some technique that seems sort of sexy from a webinar or something like that, but isn't really something that's aligned to you or even to the ideal client you're trying to attract.
Yeah, it has to feel it has to be genuine, right?
Yeah, yeah. Tell me, how do you maintain that consistency? That's a struggle for a lot of consultants, especially trying to balance client delivery with that side of your business. So tell us a little bit about how you maintain that consistency.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that I still have the answer to it. I'm still learning as I go along. But and I don't have a calendar of content that I'm going to put out or topics that I'm going to put out, but at all. But I do know that I need to be there. I need to show up at least every few weeks with something. So I start with speaking engagements or podcasts or, book excerpts, whatever those things might be that are major milestones. And then I build around that. So I have those major milestones of cadence, and then I'll fill in with the smaller touch points. But to me, LinkedIn has been definitely my most successful platform, as well as, the speaking engagements, because people are promoting me to their networks when they're promoting my engagements. So that's helped as well.
Yeah. So good. Let's you touched on this a few times, but let's switch gears and talk a little bit about how you've changed your business, set up your business in a way that is protecting your work-life balance.
Yeah. So, and once again, a bit of a work in progress. Like I don't have all the answers. All right. But, I knew that I didn't want to be working 60-hour weeks or more anymore. So, baseline, I'm looking at a 40-hour week at the max. And then I've sort of carved it back. I've actually said, well, my ideal week maybe is 35 hours or 30 hours, which I still struggle with, as A-type corporate person that just doesn't seem to, I'm still struggling with the, what do you mean if I'm not doing 80 hours a week, I'm not performing at the top level. So that's just my own internal hangups. But so I start with my baseline hours, and then I carve off a certain amount of time for, those two other pillars of the sales process, as well as the investment in the business. And that gives me a certain amount of time for client work. Right. And so from that client work, I'm building out, because I still don't have it perfectly modeled yet, a capacity planner. So I can see, where do I have ebbs? Where do I have flows? Where can I take on more or not? So that's been a part of it. But I'm using that scarcity factor, so to speak, to my benefit as well. So, people want what they can't have. And so, I only have a certain number of spots for a certain number of clients. And, if you want one of my spots and I'm not available now, you're going to have to secure your spot for downstream. So that's really worked for me as well, is being able to sort of build that book of business longer. But it's really about chunking out that week and being very mindful about what I can do and what I can't do.
Yeah. Yeah. You touched on something that I'd love to go back to too, Nicola, which was this idea of exclusivity, and just the way I think, if you're okay with me sharing this other story, when we first started working together, really the way you were thinking about yourself and the way you were thinking about your clients, and the way you were thinking about the way your clients were thinking about you, and how that shifted over, through some work we did on your positioning. Do you remember that part? Do you want to share?
Well, I think my outreach to you was, how do I say no? I don't know how. I cannot say no,
Yeah.
and that was what I was really scared about, was, I didn't want to let down my network, as a consultant, you want a steady income of clients. And so I probably didn't have the right self-confidence in myself and my ability to generate a lasting business model to say, not now. Right. So we spent a lot of time on the positioning of the no, it's not no, it's not now. And built that into the talk track. So, there's a few spots that I can take on at any given time. And if you want one of those, they sometimes will have to wait. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It backfires, sometimes they'll say no. And it's like, well, it is what it is, because I am not going to kill myself to deliver client work or substandard client work because I've taken on too many clients at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. This isn't false scarcity. This is you being really realistic about, like you said, backing into how much time you want to be spending working and what that looks like for client delivery, and kind of the average, thinking about what the average duration of projects would be for you and average revenue, and just like building up that whole plan. So, kind of what on a rolling 12-month basis, what all of that looks like.
And managing something that we've been working on lately, and I think it's good for the listeners to hear about, is what happens when it doesn't go to plan, right? Because if my capacity is tight and it's pretty scheduled, if I'm successful and there's somebody waiting for when I'm done with my current workloads, and then this workload stretches out, how do I manage that? And I think as consultants, that's something that we really need to focus on. What are our contingency plans? What are our buffers in the models that we build as well?
Yeah, and we've been working on setting up some structures for you to really protect some of your capacity, and making sure the clients are engaged and understanding their expectations of what their involvement will be, and that kind of thing. Is there anything you want to share around that, Nicola?
Yeah. And I think as yes, I have tons of experience in doing what I do, but not tons of experience in selling what I do and the value that I do, and what does it take to do what I do. So, one of and I'm still learning and I'm still figuring it out, is what are all the inputs I need and what are the outputs, and really documenting that and having a process. I'm not a process-driven person. So understanding those things so that I know how to protect myself in the scopes of work that I'm building for clients, right? So these are the things I need in order to give you X. If you can't give me those in a timely manner, or can't give them to me at all, the input of that on the deliverables is X, right? And those are hard things at first to really think through, because you haven't done it. But the more and more you think, the deliverables are somewhat the same. Like there's some common themes now with my clients, what I can see. So now each time I write a statement of work, the model is becoming more and more and more refined. So I know what to do to protect myself and them and provide that quality work.
Yeah. Let's talk. You touched on this. I would love to hear more about your thoughts on productizing what you've been doing, and how you're kind of managing things on two levels. You're delivering for clients, but you're also thinking about what you do from a productization or templatization perspective.
Because like I just mentioned, there's common themes that I'm finding now in the work that I'm doing. And I wouldn't have known that before, because I was working in a corporate role and I had one client, which was my employer, and did whatever needed to be happen. But, we're not saving lives here, right? We're building marketing strategies and events are a component of it. Those fundamentals, no matter the industry, the size of the company, the geography, whatever, they're the same. So understanding those foundational, say 80%, right? That can become productized, and then tweaked. The 20% that's specific to a specific client and the nuances to that client. So, the first time that 80% that can become productized, I'm building at scratch. It's taking, let's say it was a 100-hour project. It's taking 80 hours to do that. It doesn't take me 80 hours to do it the second time. Maybe it takes me 40. Third time, it might take me 20. Eventually, I want that 80% down to 10 hours, you know what I mean? So that then, what it allows me to do is expand my scope and my scale. I can take on more projects because that foundational process layers are there, and I'm not recreating the wheel every single time, but I'm still meeting my client's specific needs, because that's one thing as consultants we have to do is, right, we have to add value. We can't just dial in the same deliverable every single time. So how do I create that foundational element, but then also provide the right client customization on top of it? That's the fun piece. but I'm not recreating that bottom 80% all of the time.
Yeah. And that's such I think a lot of consultants miss that part. We love variety. We love a challenge. We love, starting fresh and that kind of thing. And so it can be very common to miss that opportunity to create assets for your business and really think about, even though some activity may feel very bespoke to a given client, how could this apply to others? How could it be of value to other clients? And how can I kind of templatize it to move forward? And I see that.
And how can I save it, right? To find it
Yeah.
in the future. Because, I'll go through some of my old files from when I was consulting before, and I was like, wow, I was brilliant. Well, I probably recreated it 5 or 6 different times where I could have just known that I had that foundational built and used it over and over again. So how do you keep track of the work? How do you organize the work in a way that you can find things quickly, put them on brand in templates, whatever it might be, so that you can streamline things and the deliverables that you offer.
Yeah. And always asking yourself, where is a good starting point versus assuming there isn't one and starting starting from scratch.
Yeah.
That's been
and I think the other thing, which is interrelated but not directly related, is what can you outsource?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
so
let's talk a little bit about that. You've been kind of going back and forth about, dialing in that outsourcing. So tell us where you're at with that.
Yeah. And I think, I think part of it for me is I'm building the plane as I'm flying it, right? And so I'm making it up as I go along. But as I go through this process and as I realize that there is some predictability in the deliverables that I'm building for my clients, it is becoming clearer what I need to do versus what I do not need to do and somebody else could do for me. So, if, my billable rate is higher than, and not that I'm billing on an hourly basis, and I wouldn't suggest that people do that unless you have to. My baseline billable rate is different than maybe a virtual assistant's billable rate. So what can I give to a virtual assistant? What can I give to a bookkeeper? What can I give to my nephew who can scour the internet just as much as I can? You know what I mean? What are the things that I have to use that I should be spending my time on versus what can I give to others? And I haven't got it down to a science. This, we talk about it a lot because I'm still learning and I'm still figuring out what those things are. But my intent is to create more capacity for myself by offloading as much as I can where it makes sense in a way that won't impact the deliverables or cause me more work. Because in some cases, when you're onboarding somebody else to do something, it takes you twice as long as you could do it for yourself. But the long-term investment will pay off in the end, I believe.
Yeah. You've brought up a couple of really, I think, important tactics here, the first is really doing some of that dirty work yourself, so you know exactly what it is that you're wanting to outsource and eventually train someone on. It becomes so much easier to shift something over to someone else that you've already done yourself for a bit of time and really know the ins and outs of that. And so that can be a really successful strategy in terms of outsourcing. And the other thing that you touched on as you were describing this that I think could be valuable to others as well, Nicola, is, just knowing that that things are shifting and sometimes we make mistakes and maybe bring on an assistant that wasn't a good fit or waited too long to bring someone on or whatever the things are, and just not taking that on board, that it's a problem. We're just learning and growing and adjusting and figuring it out as we go. I think I've had 4 virtual assistants and I've finally landed on one who's been with me for at least, I think, 6 months now. But there's a lot of trial and error that goes with owning a business too.
There is. And if you think about that, like you onboard one and then you have to onboard another and you have to onboard another and you're like, oh my gosh, why am I even doing this? But I do also believe that longer term, it will create capacity and it will allow me to have the balance that I want in my work life as well.
And the capacity is really two things. I mean, it's the physical hours that you're saving, but it's also that mental overhead that's, just with having this crazy long to-do list and trying to keep up with all the things that range from bookkeeping to, creating strategies for clients and everything in between, being able just to take a lot of that kind of noise off of our plate, even if it doesn't always free up a lot of time, can be incredibly valuable.
So, and I think you hit on it there, the mind time, right? Like anything that you can do, and you've got several podcasts where you talk about this, it's the mental shift, but anything you can do you got enough to worry about as a business owner, right? Anything you can do to take that mental strain or mental lift off of you, and whether it's by process or things you've thought through, situation scenarios, are just super important to do. Because then you can just put it away. You don't have to think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's shift gears a little bit, Nicola, and talk about coaching. So sometimes I get this question a lot of what is, I don't understand what a coach does to help me. I don't understand what coaching is. My only reference point of a coach is, executives in corporate who had an executive coach. And so we've been working together. I would love it if you would share your insights on, why you touched on this briefly when we first started, but why did you decide that working with a coach would be a good step for you in the direction of your business?
Yeah. So I wanted to build the right foundation. To me, that was critical. And, from day one, I wanted to focus on building a long-term sustainable foundation. So I found your podcast. I didn't even interview another coach. There was no conversation needed for me. You were the right person and I was going to stalk you. So you agreed to work with me. So fortunately you agreed quickly, because otherwise it would have been a real pain in your neck. But, to me, you've been there. You've done it. You've been through it. You've gone from big corporate to the shift to independent consultant. There is a mind shift, and make no mistake, anybody that's thinking about that shift, it is a mentally big mind shift that you have to make, leaving the corporate world behind. You've gone through that. You've helped multiple other clients build businesses, either fix problems that they had or build from the beginning. And you've just got different experience than I had. Same as my clients hire me for my expertise. I hired you, and others hire you for your expertise, because you are able to help people like me build sustainable long-term businesses. So that was sort of my mindset coming in from it. And, I've had executive coaching before, but I've never had, I'm going to call it a relationship, like I've had with you, because you get me. You sometimes tell me I'm being ridiculous and give me a little slap across the side of the head, but you really help me deal with my day to day, and work through things that I didn't even know were issues or could be fixed or could be optimized. Many times I come into the call and go, wonder what we're going to talk about today. I'm flying on top of the world, but in the end, the hour would be over and I'd be like, no, I don't want it to be done, because you have this ability to help cut through the noise and the clutter for me, to really focus on things that are important that I didn't even know were important for me to focus on.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much. And I, just kind of sharing what it's like to have a coach on your side. I have one all the time myself. And I have to also say, just from a coach perspective, clients like you who show up and are really open and transparent and willing to talk about things that feel uncomfortable, willing to talk about things that feel like, a failure, or feel like they're not quite working yet, and things that are going great. And how do we replicate what's going great? We oftentimes don't even give ourselves credit for the things that are going well. And you show up for all of it. And really have done, it's amazing to see how far your business has come just in these last few months, from launching it to really having a very clear line of sight into what your revenue and your capacity and who you're going to be working with for the next, at least through the end of the year.
Yeah, that actually, that the business plan and the revenue model, that was one of the first things that we worked on. I remember you said to me, well, what's your revenue plan for the year? Like, what's your target? And I'm like, I don't know. And I'm proud of it. And you were like, tough love. You're like, would you have accepted that as an answer in your previous life? Of course you wouldn't have. Why would you not have a business plan? I'm like, okay, I'll get one created, but that tough love is what I needed. Right. And, and now just going back to building the plan. Now I know when I'm on track or if I'm not on track, and I'm fortunately on track. And I'm not panicking and thinking like, oh my gosh, I need to take on more and more and more clients and I need to work harder and harder and harder, because I don't actually know where I am towards my goals. I have clear goals. I now know that I'm doing really well against them. So I can allow myself that work-life balance, which I probably, if I didn't know that, I would probably be freaking out and taking on way more clients than I needed to for absolutely no reason. And then not preserving why I did this in the first place. Right. And so, just that was the first uncomfortable one and of our conversations. And, I embraced it and leaned into it. And I pull that plan out on a monthly basis and check where I am against it.
Yeah. And it's kind of a roadmap for you, right? To remind yourself, oh, this particular potential client seems really good. Maybe I should just somehow squeeze them in. And then you go back to that plan and check yourself against it. And like you said, it helps you give some guardrails.
But at the same time, it also, you have to trust your instinct as a consultant too. To your example there was a particular client that I took on, and I remember telling you, I'm like, I took on another client. I knew I shouldn't have, and you're like, okay, well, you sure you manage it? I'm like, yeah, I can manage it, and it turned out to be the funnest project I've done this year, and it's opened a door to a much bigger opportunity with the same client. So, sometimes I think as much as we have plans, we also have to trust our instincts as well as consultants. And if it feels right, then it feels right and follow through.
That's such a good point, because if you had said no to that client because they didn't fit well onto your paper, you would have missed out on a really fun client and that future opportunity. So definitely not negating or ignoring that inner voice can be. It's a tricky thing to really know when to listen to your intuition and when it's just justifying something that's is not the right fit.
Right.
So you've been really sorting through that, I think, too.
Yeah. And still learn from it every day. Right. Believe me, I don't have all the answers at all, but it's an amazing journey.
Yeah, so fun to see how far you've come. Tell us anything that was kind of a surprise or biggest aha that you've taken away so far in your business here as you've relaunched it in the last few months.
Yeah, I think a few things. So I touched on this briefly, and you have a podcast, and you probably, I'm going to catch you off guard. So you might want to put it in the show notes or whatever after to tell people. But there was one, I remember I sent you a message one night. I was cooking dinner and I was listening to your podcast, and it was about the mental mindset shift from corporate and to independent consultant, and, about happiness and how happiness is not tied to busy work. And, and I know I'm not doing it justice, but I remember it was a 2-part podcast, and I remember being so moved by it. I was like, you literally were talking to me in that podcast. And so that was a big aha moment for me, that I really needed to leave that corporate mindset behind of the, you got to be on the rat wheel and hustling 24/7, and you're not worthy if you're not working like ridiculous. Separating myself from that and realizing that was a thing, because I didn't realize that the last time around, was huge for me. So that's that. And I go back and I do, I have it marked in my favorites because it's important, will be important for me to listen to on a regular basis. So I think that was one. Another one you've talked about a lot is investing in your business and like your CEO mindset versus your worker mindset, and spending money on the business and investing in the right way. That was another thing for me. Like I built my own website. Why? It looks great. I mean, I'm happy with it.
Great. Yeah.
But it could have been done in a third of the time, much more like I'm sure professionally than the lift it took me. So, and that was early on, that was pre you. So, sort of figuring out where to invest in other areas versus feeling like I have to do it myself and save every single dollar, because it's not salary, it's corporate money. It's different.
Yeah, it can be such a tricky thing mentally. First of all, I mean, we're so used to, you were an executive level within SAP, but you still had budgets to manage to and people to be accountable to, and in some, at some level get permission to spend whatever was above your budget or even getting approval for the budget, right? And so
even if it was your budget, you had to get approval for it, for sure.
So it's such a different mind shift. I remember, I can think back, I don't know, it was probably my third year in business or fourth year in business. And I wanted to go to a conference, and it was so foreign to me that I would spend money that wasn't going to be paid back on an expense report to go somewhere. And then I realized I get to decide, I give myself permission, and I can go on a plane if I want to and spend money at this conference because I know it will benefit my business. It took me 3 or 4 years to figure that out. So you're well ahead of me.
Which is why your podcast is so relevant and useful, I think, to people, because you've been through the journey, and, we can learn from your journey. We can all learn from each other's journeys, right?
Yeah, that's why I am so glad you're here today, because I think you're such an inspiration. You're on version 2.0 of your business, and so successful, being sought after for what you do, and just really figuring out how are you going to run this business on your own terms, and what does that look like, and what processes you want to put in place in order to really create a business that you love working in every day.
Yeah.
So much fun.
Well, thank you. And thank you for everything you've taught me.
Oh, so happy that you've come into my life. Tell me, truly, Nicola, tell me what's next for you. What is next for you and your business in the next couple of years?
Wow. I think more of the same, but in continuing to work smarter, not harder. If that makes sense. I have no aspirations to build an agency or build a big company of employees. Been there, done that. Don't need hundreds of employees anymore. And so really, I do want to stay small. One of the things we've been working through, and I think it's important probably for some of the other listeners to think through, is your teaming strategy. So how do you find good partners that you can trust? How do you build the business in a way that creates revenue streams that are not actually consulting work, right? So referrals or whatever that might be, there are alternate revenue streams that we can create as consultants that are non-traditional consulting work, right? So, really focusing on that and focusing on, on just doing the work I love and working with cool people.
Yeah, love it. It's so good. I think that's such an important point, that an independent consulting business doesn't have to be a stepping stone to something bigger. It can be really successful and profitable and fun and simple to run, staying lean and mean.
Yeah. And I think, for anybody that's made the transition or making the transition, I think we all struggle with the fact that having a large logo associated with our name does, is our value, we think, is tied to that, and it's not. And, so I still continue to struggle a little bit with that. Am I important now that I don't work for SAP? Of course I am. I'm still the same person. I still have the same skills. And so, I'm still going through the transition, right? I'm 6 months post breakup, so to speak, from corporate. So, I'll continue to learn and lean in from that as well. But I wanted to share that because it's a real thing, and it's a real adjustment that we all have to go through when we're making that transition.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that self-identity. I think so many of us attached, really starting probably at a young age. I'm going to be, I'm going to have this title and this office and this sort of stature that and status that gets associated to all of that in our minds and culturally. And when you don't have that anymore, you don't have a big name, behind you, whether it's a title or a company name, it's a lot of self-identity work, recreating that self-identity. But it can be so valuable, right? Because now it's just based on you, not on any external.
And you get to do the work you want for people that you want. Like, what's better than that?
100%. Yeah. So good. Strip it all down.
Absolutely.
Strip it all away. Yes.
Absolutely.
Nicola, we've covered so much ground today, and I really appreciate you and your time and the podcast for connecting us together. Tell me, is there anything else that you would like to share?
Oh gosh, no, I don't think so. Just anybody that is thinking about Melissa as a coach, do it. That's all I can say. And I know you're going to be mad at me probably even for saying this, but do it. You have been such a godsend to me. So thank you for all that you do to help me and all of your other clients be successful.
Well, I appreciate you, and tell us where the listeners can find you if they would like to.
Sure.
Look into more about what you do.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And anyone wants to critique my website, feel free. That I built myself. NicolaKastner.com is my website. And, please reach out if, I'm a firm believer in community. And, we're all in this together. So if I can help anyone or provide any advice, I'm happy to do that as well.
Thank you so much. And thank you for your generous time today and for coming into my life. I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you.
All right. We'll talk soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.